We got some UFC action set to take place next Saturday. We got a main event of Derrick Lewis and Sergey Spivac. The Black Beast looking to get some redemption against a Sergey. We know he's coming off a tough loss against the knockout artist Sergey Pavlovich. Now, unfortunately, the Korean Zombie will not be fighting on this card. Initially, this card was centered around him. He did have to pull out due to an injury. The UFC since has moved this card from Seoul, South Korea, over to Las Vegas. The fight's taking place at the UFC Apex Center. We have 4 tournament finalist fights coming from the road to UFC, ranging from the flyweight division all the way up to the lightweight division. All of those fights should be very exciting. This card really embodies up-and-coming talent from Asia and from that side of the world. And if you're a diehard fan of the UFC, you really want to see this, because the UFC is lacking a little bit as far as talent from that side of the world compared to some of these other organizations, obviously like ONE FC and whatnot. I think that they can step it up, and I feel like they have been stepping it up. So this is a card that really embodies that. I'm excited for it. You guys know what we got going on here. We're talking about all the betting lines in regards to this fight card. We're talking about how these fighters match up, and I got a great show lined up for you guys. Hit that like button while you're at it. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the show. This is the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.
What is up, you guys? We are back for another breakdown video. It's great to be on the mic. I appreciate all you guys tuning in. Before we jump into the first fight, like I said, if you guys could please hit that like button, it really means a lot to me. It really helps the channel out. Hit that subscribe button. Catch me on all my social media. We got Instagram. We got MMA Fortune Teller _ where I got all types of cool posts coming at you guys. It's a great way to interact with me. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think I got the best MMA Instagram page in the game, and I think it needs a little bit more respect, man. I'm trying to hit that 10K marker, so go help me out there. I'm over on Twitter at the MMA Teller, and that's a great way to pick my brain and see what I'm thinking about, what's going on with the MMA world on a daily basis. So go catch me on Twitter at the MMA Teller. And of course, if you guys are looking to work with me for my official plays, you could shoot me an email, shoot me a DM on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and I can send you over my pricing. And of course, you guys know we had back-to-back years where we have absolutely killed it in regards to betting on the sport of MMA, specifically on the UFC. All right, guys. So with that all being said, we take a little scroll down this fight card, and we're going to be jumping right into the first fight of the card taking place in the flyweight division. We got Tatsuro Taira taking on Jesus Aguilar. Both of these fighters coming off Dana White's Contender Series recently, but do understand that Taira has had a chance to get his feet wet in an official UFC match. Looked absolutely spectacular against CJ Vergara, pulling off that armbar submission. Really showcasing that he is just very technical, whether it's on the feet, in the striking department, or if it's down on the mat. He's a very fine-tuned, well-rounded fighter, and especially when you take into consideration he just turned 23 about a week ago. Shout out to Bobby Schmurda about a week ago. But seriously, Taira, extremely young and just showing so much poise inside the cage or inside the ring. He's a very talented fighter, and I do believe that he is going to be the face of Japanese mixed martial arts, especially fighting in the UFC, representing Japan in the UFC. I truly believe that he is the bright prospect coming out of Japan. I'm really excited to see how far he could push it. But to this matchup, right? He has a tough test in front of him. Aguilar showcased once again that he has a nasty guillotine. This is his specialty. This wasn't a fluke when he pulled this sub off on the show. Take a look at his resume. He pulls this sub off over and over. His opponents have to know that it's coming or that it's a serious threat, and they still find themselves down there. So when you see a fighter doing that time and time again, you do have to understand that it's a serious threat. We saw this with Cody McKenzie back in the day. People knew that guillotine was coming, but somehow they would always find themselves in that position. And, he kind of reminds me of McKenzie there. He's a tough fighter. We saw, on his fight on Dana White's Contender Series against Erison Ferreira, the Brazilian fighter, that Aguilar has some grappling skills. We saw him get in on his opponent's hips, get him down to the mat. We saw a lot of toughness coming from Jesus. We saw him, controlling Erison Ferreira's, controlling him from the back position and really, just looking like he's competent down on the ground, down on the mat. But even saying that, I do expect Taira to be a step ahead down there. I also expect Taira to have a significant striking advantage here. He's just a little bit more polished technically. I love the fact that he has almost an 8-inch reach advantage there. And I just think that Taira is going to take this fight. Now, if you guys have had a chance to take a look at the betting line, any sports book you go look, the line is pretty ridiculous. Over on Bovada.lv, he's a minus 1,200. On average, I'm seeing him right around that minus 1,000 range. He's a huge favorite here. That's a little surprising to me. I understand the hype on him, but I was a little surprised to see that people aren't respecting Aguilar, who was shown to be pretty tough here. So yes, I am picking Tatsuro Taira to win this fight. I think he wins a unanimous decision. I think Aguilar is tough enough and skilled enough to survive here. But as far as where the value lies, I got to say it lies over on the Aguilar side because this line is just ridiculous. So, the line, a little bit too much for me, but I do expect Tatsuro Taira to be a step ahead and keep an eye on him on the feet to really land at distance, at bay, and really outstrike Aguilar there. I think you'll have some success there. And if Aguilar pushes the pressure and wants to get this fight down to the mat, Taira is not a slouch there at all. And Aguilar better be careful there as well. Give me Tatsuro Taira to get the job done. Yeong Park taking on Denis Tiuliulin. You guys know I just had an official play on Denis, and he was actually a slight dog there against Jamie Pickett. So much respect to Denis here. Putting some money in my pocket. Denis has shown that he's extremely tough. I do believe that he needs to sharpen some things up in regards to his skill set. Yeah, he has power. Like I said, he's extremely tough. He'll come forward, but I just think that he's a little bit lacking in the skill set department, and I think he could run into some trouble here against a fighter that I believe to be very polished in the Iron Ninja. He has very good boxing skills. He's a well-rounded fighter, and if you really think back to his UFC debut, where he did lose that fight against Fluffy Hernandez, who has shown to be a tough outing for anybody. Park was winning that fight, and I remember very clearly because I had an official play on Anthony Hernandez. The play did cash, but I was sweating. And if you guys remember, that was a fight card that took place very early, taking place over in Asia. And Anthony Hernandez was losing that fight. He was getting picked apart and made the fight ugly and eventually caught Park in an anaconda choke. But since that loss, victories over Marc-Andre Barriault, John Phillips, Tefon, and Chukwi, dropped a fight against Gregory Rodriguez, but we all have a lot of respect for Gregory, and then bounced back with 2 victories over Eric Anders, tough outing, and then Joseph Holmes, where he really outclassed him there and got the submission victory. I believe that Park is a very talented fighter, a very refined fighter. I expect him to have an edge here in the striking department, in the boxing department. If Denis is going to get the job done, I think he needs to make things very ugly and try to land a big shot and shake things up. And, with that being said, I am going to be I'm going to be taking the Iron Turtle to get the job done here. I think that he's a fine-tuned fighter, and overall, he is the more talented fighter. So let's take a look at the betting line here. You're going to see that Denis Tiuliulin is an underdog. Let's see if Bovada.lv, here it is. Denis Tiuliulin is a plus 160 dog with the comeback on Yeong Park at minus 200, a flat 2-1 favorite here. Is there any value on Denis as a dog at plus 160? If you guys believe there is, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you there. I think that there's potentially some value there, but I'm going to say that I'm still leaning towards more value on Park at minus 200. Now, if that line starts creeping up to minus 230, minus 240, I think that line is getting out of hand. But on film, when you break down tape on these fighters, Yeong Park should be able to land his jab and just be a little bit more clean with his boxing skills. Denis is tough. He'll march forward, but I expect Park to land. Park has shown that he's a well-rounded fighter as well. So, he will have a 4-inch reach disadvantage, and he will be about 3 inches shorter. There's a little bit of a size disadvantage here from Park's standpoint, but I'm not really minding that. I think that Park is the more talented fighter. Denis has had a very padded record as well, something worth taking note of. He had a very padded record coming into the UFC, but he's shown to be tough, and he's trained with some high-level talent. That's a good thing going for him. He's definitely trained with some high-level talent. I know he was training in Vegas, I believe, at Extreme Couture and whatnot. He's surrounded himself with some good talent, but still on film, he's shown that he has some holes in his game. Give me Park to get the job done, and I'm going to favor the value even on that minus 200 line there. Yeon Kim taking on Mandy Böhm. Mandy Böhm has had a tough time since making her UFC debut. She's 0-2, lost to Ariane Lipsky and then Victoria Leonardo. The Victoria Leonardo fight about 4 months ago. That was the last time that she stepped down in the octagon. 7-2 now. She was undefeated coming into the UFC, fighting out of Germany. She's 33 years old. She's not young. As far as how these women match up physically, almost identical. Yeong came on a 4-fight losing streak, but look a little bit deeper into the 4-fight losing skid. A loss to Alexa Grasso, who's about to be fighting for the belt. A loss to Molly McCann, who we know is a talented striker, and that was an absolute war, a very close fight. A loss to Priscilla Cochuera, which a lot of people thought that Kim did win that fight, and that was another fight that she stood her own. She held her own. And then a loss to Jocelyn Edwards, and another very close matchup there. So Yeon Kim has had some tough luck there. She's a talented striker. She has some good striking skills. She's decently well-rounded. Mandy Böhm just has not shown anything to me for me to feel that there's to feel any type of confidence backing her. I'm just really not sure if she is a UFC caliber fighter. And in fact, I lean towards the way that she's not a UFC talented fighter. She's not that level of talent. So I do expect her to drop this fight, and I expect it will be the last time we see her fight inside the octagon. You watch her throw down in the cage. I mean, she has decent head movement. She looks like she's competent there. She's nimble. She looks like she's going to go out there and showcase some real striking skills, but she just doesn't, and she's lacking in a lot of different areas. I'm not a fan of her ground game. I'm not a fan of her striking. I'm just really not a fan of anything I've seen from her on tape, unless she's fighting some lower level talent. Whereas Yeon Kim, at least I've seen her in there. I've seen her in the cage throwing down with some high level talent, and I've seen her showcase some skills. So yes, I will be taking her. Let's go see where this betting line is. I think you guys know where it's all going to be. We're going to see a pretty decent favorite here in Kim. Yeon Kim a minus 275. The comeback on Mandy Böhm at plus 220. I mean, this line could be worse. I know it's still a pretty high line. I feel like this line could be worse, and it could settle in at a worse line. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Kim hit that minus 350 marker. I really wouldn't be surprised. We do have some time until these fights take place. I'm recording this Friday, the 27th. We have about 8 days until the fights take place, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see action coming on Kim. I mean, when people look into Böhm, I think they're going to see that they're just not impressed from what they see from her, and Yeon Kim should be able to outstrike Böhm here and win a unanimous decision. That's the route I'm going. I think that she just styles on Mandy, and I'll say that there's more value at a minus 275 line on Kim. And let's pull up over on Best Fight Odds. Let's see what kind of movement we're seeing here. If we could, Yeon Kim over on DraftKings opening up at a minus 255 and dipping down to as high as a minus 295 favorite, and then kind of going back up a little bit there. So you see the action kind of trending that way mostly throughout all the different sports books, and I think that's the trend you'll see. I got Yeon Kim to win that fight. Over in the flyweight division, wrapping up the road to UFC, we have Hyun Sung Park taking on Seung Choi, two Southern Korean fighters. Both went 2-0 on the road to UFC, but a little bit of different types of performances. Park with 2 finishes, pulling off a beautiful rear naked choke where he went out there and made very, very quick work of his opponent, Tapnoy Kiram, who was 8-3 at the time. He absolutely went out there and just outclassed him. And then the fight before that, he went out there and got a knockout victory as well. So showing once again on the road to UFC that he is a finisher. If you take a look at his 7 pro fights, he does have a track record of going out there and outclassing his opponents. On the other hand, Seung Choi, a very aggressive fighter. He's a scrappy dude, but not nearly as many finishes throughout his 7 pro fights. And listen, when you're analyzing a fighter, I mean, you shouldn't necessarily just say, oh, is he finishing fights, or and really hold it against him if he's going to a decision. I mean, look at George St. Pierre. I mean, one of the greatest of all times, arguably the GOAT, and in some people's eyes, didn't have a lot of finishes throughout his career, went out there and dominated his opponent. So I'm not necessarily trying to put Choi under the magnifying glass there, but what I want to say is when you're looking at these two fighters and you have limited amount of things to analyze, both of these guys kind of fighting lower level opponents, I am more impressed with the fighter that's going out there and finishing his opponents. That does say something to me. He has gone out there in Park and has shown that he's just on another level than his opponents, just making quick work of them. So it is impressive to me. Now Park is going to be an inch taller here. He's going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. He's slightly the larger fighter as well. Very composed on the feet. Seems to be pretty technical. He could work on some head movement. He is there to be hit a little bit. And if Choi can capitalize that in the feet, if he's sharpening up his striking here, I do think that Park will be there to be tagged a little bit. But overall, Hyun Sung Park to me seems like the much better fighter when you're breaking down the tape. So yes, I am going to be picking Park to get the job done here. Now, we'll see. There's not a major track record with either of these fighters, but I am going to take Park to get the job done via finish. Now, Seung Choi, he does only have 1 defeat throughout his career, and that did come by way of a decision. So he has never been finished. Even if you look into his amateur fights, he's been finished 1 time, and that was his first ever fight as an amateur. He got caught in a rear naked choke. Maybe we see him get caught in another one of those. I'll angle that way. I was very impressed with what I saw from Park in that fight again against Tapnoy Kiram, where he went out there and made very quick work of him, and that fight only took place 2 months ago. So I'm expecting him to kind of leave off on that beat, where we'll need to see a little bit more from his opponent here. And Choi, I want to see a little bit more from him before I'm going to be giving him any type of respect there. Hyun Sung Park, right now, we take a look at best fight odds, where you'll see that Park opened up roughly at a -195. We saw that line dip towards the -215 range over on DraftKings, and it's kind of settled back up at -190. So that's a little bit interesting. A little bit of wave there with the line movement, a little up and down. I'm kind of interested to see where that line continues to go from there. But overall, I do believe that Park shows to be the better fighter here, and I will side with him. Let's see how that fight plays out. Out of the 4 finals of the Road to UFC fights that are taking place throughout this card, I would say this one probably intrigues me the most. The bantamweight final here, we got Rinya Nakamura taking on Toshiomi Kazama. Nakamura, some of you guys are probably familiar with him. A fighter coming out of Japan. He's 6-0. He's undefeated, and he has quite a substantial background in wrestling, which you guys know is the best base to have coming in to the sport of MMA. So he has that behind him. He's been going out there. He's been looking very good. We take a look at what he was doing over on the road to UFC. I was definitely more impressed with his last fight against Shohei Nose, where he went out there and made quick work of him and finished him via TKO there. Went out there and just was walking him down, putting it on him with the striking. And to me, that fight was significant because when I watched his first fight, where he did pull off the submission against Guzman, pulled off that Kimura key lock submission. He used his wrestling, ripped the takedown there, got on top of his opponent, and just was able to muscle that submission, really outclassing his opponent. But on the feet, he's a southpaw. He was walking forward with the southpaw stance. He looked a little bit robotic to me. And although, people are praising him with the grappling background and all that, the first thing that I'm thinking when I'm watching it is, if he were to be fighting UFC talent, I think that he'd be getting teed off on the feet there. I think that he needs to work on his head movement. He's a little bit stiff at times. He's decently technical with his striking. He's throwing his shots, up the middle nice. He's not really throwing looping punches. He throws them nice and straight, but he's just a little bit slow and robotic. Obviously, he's working on that. And But again, that was the first thing that came to mind. Now his opponent, he's a scrappy guy in the feet, but really more known for his jiu-jitsu skills. I mean, down on the mat, he's been pulling off a lot of submission victories. He's 10-2, so 12 pro fights now. Let's see what he's been doing. Fighting out of Japan as well. 25 years old. He's coming off a decision on the road to UFC. And then remember now, his other fight that was supposed to happen on the road to UFC was canceled. I believe his opponent, Min Woo Kim, did miss weight. So before that was finished via flying knee. And then we talked about his submission skills, pulling off a variety of submissions throughout the early part of his pro career. Arm lock victories, triangle chokes, heel hooks, using even his grappling to pull off a ground and pound win there. Punches from the twister position, an arm bar, ground punch, another interesting finish there early in his career. So he's had a variety of finishes there. He obviously shows to be somewhat of a dangerous opponent. Not that I'm extremely impressed with the level of competition that he's been fighting. This fight here, I think that this is going to be a little bit of a tough matchup for Kazama, because although he does have some ground skills, Nakamura, in my opinion, will outclass him there. He'll be significantly stronger in the clinch. He'll be the fighter that controls this fight down on the mat. In my opinion, I think he'll be able to avoid that submission, and I could see Nakamura continuing to develop in front of our eyes here in this fight. When we watch this fight, I think we'll see more growth in him. I think he gets the job done. So let's go take a look at the betting line here. A quick note, both men 5'7". Nakamura within 1 inch reach disadvantage, if you want to even call it that. We'll go slide over to Bovada, where you'll see that Rinya Nakamura is a minus 450 favorite. Yes, he is one of the bigger favorites on this fight card here. I wouldn't be shocked if Kazama could make this a scrappy fight and make this play out a little bit closer than some people think it's going to play out. I would not be shocked there. But overall, I got to side with Nakamura. I'm going to say that he wins a unanimous decision here using his wrestling. But I'm going to say that Kazama actually survives here and goes to a decision and shows that he is a scrappy dude and that he does have some skills. But overall, I think that he will be a little bit outmatched here. So yes, we do have Rinya Nakamura to win the fight. The line minus 450. Do I see value on that? It's really tough to say, man. I'm not crazy about these types of lines, especially with fighters that don't have a major track record. A minus 450. I like the wrestling pedigree that he brings in. I'll edge there's more value there because I do see him getting the job done, but I do not say that with a lot of confidence here. I'm telling you guys, we need to see a little bit more from him. He's very green, and Kazama's a scrappy guy that has shown that he has a nose to get the finish throughout his career. But Nakamura to use that wrestling and win a unanimous decision, most likely. In the featherweight tournament final, we got Yi taking on Yong Lee. We got the Chinese fighter taking on the Southern Korean fighter here. Yi, first off, has a good amount of experience that's definitely worth noting. 24 pro fights. He had a rear naked choke submission on the road to UFC, and then he had a split decision in his last fight. It was a closely fought match with Koyomi Matsushima, who was 13-5 going into that fight. Like I said, a lot of experience Yi's way for being a 26-year-old fighter. This is going to be a tough fight for Yi here, in my opinion. Yong Lee, to me, was very impressive on the show. We saw the two finishes from him, one via submission, one via knockout. The finish that he had over Bin Xi, another Chinese fighter there, the armbar that he pulled off, to me, was very impressive. His opponent, Bin, looked to close the distance on him there, and was pushing him up against the cage, trying to get a takedown. And we just saw an onslaught of elbows coming in, kind of reminiscent to Travis Brown back in the day. If you remember Travis Brown dropping those elbows. Excuse me, guys. Who was that on? Was that on Josh Barnett? I believe it might have been on Josh Barnett. Was it Josh Barnett or Frank Mir? Excuse me there. Comment below. You guys know what I'm talking about, but a little reminiscent to that, dropping the elbows there and then instantly just snatching up an armbar. The way that he pulled it off was very impressive. On the other hand, Yi, I wasn't overly impressed from what I've seen from him within his two fights on the road to UFC. He's also coming into this fight slightly undersized, right? He's going to be at a 3-inch height disadvantage. His reach about 2.5 inches or so, about 2 inches of a disadvantage there. I just think that he will be a slightly smaller. I like the frame that Lee has here, and I also feel that he shows to be a more talented fighter on tape. And you see the two men squaring off here. And this is a fight that really should be fun. If you guys didn't really catch wind of this, these guys are bringing some energy into this fight. So some real bragging rights there for the winner. No shock here. I mean, a lot of people that have been paying attention to these guys here, a lot of people have been impressed with Lee. I have been as well. Let's go take a look at the betting line here, where you will see that Lee is going to be the favorite here. Right now, Bovada.lv, he's a minus 260. That's a pretty decent favorite there. And I think that line is respectable. I think that when I was breaking down tape on both these guys, that's kind of where I was capping this line, right around that range, right in the minus 200 range. I was curious if we would see it creep up to that minus 300 range. I'm not sure if we'll see that line hit as high as that. We'll keep an eye on that. Let's see how the line's been moving throughout the last week or so. Let's take a look here. Give me 1 second, guys. Let's find this fight here, and we will see. Here we go. On DraftKings, you see that Lee has opened up at a minus 240. We saw it dip down to as high as a minus 260, and then also coming back a little bit to minus 250. I don't know if they'll hit the minus 300 range, but I do expect it to stay right around the middle of the minus 200s, and I think that that's a respectable line. And I'll favor that there's more value in a minus 250 on Lee here than even Yi, because I just feel that Lee is the fighter that shows to have more promise, and a fighter that I could actually see hanging around in the UFC, showcasing his skills throughout the next couple of years, where, I could be biting my words, but I need to see more from Yi. I'm not really sure if he's a fighter that hangs around, but we'll see about that. Lightweight finals of Road to UFC. Anshul, Jubli taking on Jeka, Saragih. Saragih, fighting out of Indonesia. His hero is Conor McGregor. I found that to be interesting. This is a guy that looks up to Conor there. Jeka is a fighter that is very entertaining to watch. I think that he is a decently well-rounded fighter. In some of his fights, we've seen him showcase some of his grappling abilities, exploiting some of his opponents' holes in their game. I saw him rip the fight down to the mat, work some ground and pound, seemed to be competent with his movement to an extent. But what impressed me more so is his striking. In fact, if you guys didn't see the spinning back fist that he landed, that was in his first fight on the road to UFC 7 months ago, the spinning back fist that he landed on Pawan Man Singh, definitely go pull that tape up, go Google that fight, and you'll see that fight pull up. And that was a perfectly timed and located spinning back fist. It was a very, very impressive strike there, man. The whip that he put on it. I think he's a good striker. Right off that fight, he goes into his next one about 4 months after that fight and goes out there and lands a nice straight right, gets the knockout victory over Won Bin Ki. And now he heads into a big matchup with an undefeated fighter in Anshul, who's fighting out of India. A lot of people believe that he has the potential to represent India, in the sport of MMA. Obviously, there's not a lot of big names fighting out of India. A lot of you guys know that there is a major fan base, out of the country, India. Of course, I mean, some of the major sports they have, of course, cricket and things like that. But, in the MMA world, you don't really see a lot of big-time Indian fighters. I personally would love to see an Indian star. You guys know how I feel. I like to see big-time fighters from all around the world. To me, it's always exciting to see different people, the different cultures, different countries being represented in the sport of MMA, especially at the heights of the game in the UFC. So yes, I do hope that we see more fighters come out from that part of the world and from that country. But if I'm being honest, I haven't really seen it up until this point. Anshul, Jubli, yeah, he's somewhat promising. He's has a good frame for the division. He's a strong kid. Has some skills. I'm not trying to hate on the guy. I mean, on the road to UFC, he had one split decision victory over Hyun Pyo Kim, the fighter fighting out of South Korea. And, we could take a look at his 6 pro fights real quick so you kind of have an idea what he's been putting out there. He's 28 years old. Had an arm triangle choke in his fight before the road to UFC. His first fight, I believe, was canceled on the road to UFC against Show Patrick Usami. So only had one fight on the show. And then fighting over at Matrix Fight Night, you see one knockout finish, one arm triangle choke. Other than that, going to decisions. I would need to see more from him. Not that I'm completely sold on Jeka, but I've been decently impressed with him. I'm going to be siding with Jeka Saragih. And this is a fight where we're going to be talking about the betting line here because I am kind of interested how this line's been going. But real quick, we'll pull up Bovada.lv where you will see that Jubli is a very, very slight favorite. He's a -115 with the comeback at -105 on Saragih. But let's take a quick look at how this line has moved throughout the last couple weeks. Let's see here. Wish they had these fights separated in order from where they are on the card, but that's not the case. So we take a look on DraftKings. Very slight movement. Saragih opened at a -110 on DraftKings, dipped to even odds, and then has came back to -110. So a little up and down there. I do expect that the line to stay pretty even here, and I am favoring the value on Jeka Saragih. I'm impressed with what I've seen. I think that he'll continue to sharpen things up, and I think that he'll kind of land some big shots on the feet throughout this fight, just kind of solidifying a decision here. Maybe he lands that big shot and gets the finish. I wouldn't bank on that, but I could definitely see him working some magic and just kind of getting the better on the judges' scorecards there. So give me Jeka Saragih via decision. We're talking main card action here. Yusaku Kinoshita taking on Adam Fugitt. Adam, forget about it. All right, guys, if you didn't realize, this is going to be one of the most entertaining fights throughout this card. This is a perfect way to kick off the main card. If you're not really familiar with Adam Fugitt and you notice that he's a fighter that I believe took a short notice fight in his debut and got finished, and just seems kind of like a basic fighter coming over from the LFA scene. I'd be quick to tell you that you're kind of wrong on that. Break down the tape on Adam. Adam Fugitt, 8-3 as a pro, but this is a fighter that has a knack for the finish. He brings the fight. Had that big time finish against Solomon Renfro, which if you guys remember, Solomon Renfro was a fighter that's been really hyped up. He fought on Dana White's Contender Series in a main event slot. Took on that striking coach, I believe from Factory X. I forget exactly what gym it was, if it was Extreme Couture or whatnot, but the Muay Thai coach, Parsons, I believe his name was, who brought the fight. But really everybody thought that Solomon Renfro should have got the victory there, should have got a contract to the UFC. Well, guess what happens after he doesn't get the nod there? Takes a fight over in LFA against Adam Fugitt and gets knocked out in the first round. So that was a very tough loss for Solomon Renfro. But after that fight, the fight we mentioned, Michael Morales did finish Adam Fugitt. It was in the third round, but understand that Michael Morales, coming off Dana White's Contender Series as well, is a stud, has a wrestling background. He's a stud athlete, and he is a fighter that shows to have a lot of promise. All right, so before that, never mind this grappling loss to Nick Maximov. That's good to see Fugitt just staying active in that aspect there at Submission Underground. Adam Fugitt is a finisher. Take a look here. Second round knockout victory over Devon Brock. Rear naked choke victory in the third round against Renaud Remigio. A Kimura victory in the second round against Jonathan Vistante. And now I know that these fighters don't have very impressive resumes, but just understand that he's going out there and he's getting finishes. And I told you already he had to finish over Solomon Renfro. But, look, the loss to Kalen Hill, a very talented fighter that fought on Dana White's Contender Series as well. The loss to Austin Vanderford, Paige Van Zant's girlfriend. And, so understand that his losses have came by way of very, very talented or high-level fighters, and that other than that, he's been going out there and finishing all these fighters, even though they're lower levels. So just understand he brings the fight. When you break down tape on Adam, he's very accurate with his shots. He's a southpaw fighter that pressures, and I expect him to go in here and to bring the fight to Yusaku Kinoshita. Now, that all being said, let's talk about Kinoshita, because I am a major fan of Kinoshita. In fact, right now, Kinoshita, him and, excuse me here, the power of the internet. I don't know why, man. I'm just brain freezing, man. We're talking thousands of fighters here, but of course, Tatsuro Taira. Tatsuro Taira and Yusaku Kinoshita, in my opinion, are two of the most promising fighters coming out of Japan, and I'm very, very excited for their careers. Kinoshita, 22 years old, extremely young as well. The one loss that he had, I know you guys all are familiar with this. That's the fight where he got DQ'd for grabbing the cage. He was grabbing the cage to get, his balance and momentum as he was stomping on his opponent, Sumamura's head. All right, so just understand that should have been another knockout victory there. Kinoshita is an absolute savage. Kinoshita going out there and finishing all of his opponents, okay? Finishing all of his opponents. Again, we're going to count that as a finish. But most impressive to me was his finish over Jose Enrique Souza. That was on Dana White's Contender Series. Souza is a very, very promising fighter. He's only 5-1, but if you know about him, you know about him. If you've been hearing what they've been... people in his circle have been saying, this kid is very, very promising, fighting out of Nova União, 20 years old, 6'3" frame for the division. He's well-rounded. He's nasty. And in that fight, they went to war. And in the third round, he did get put down by Kinoshita. So Kinoshita just showing that it's not a fluke. I mean, he's carrying that skill set into the octagon, fighting with some of the best fighters in the world, and he's going out there and still showcasing that skill set. All right, so yes, I am going to be favoring Kinoshita to land that big shot on Fugitt, but just understand that Adam Fugitt is going to be there, and he's going to be looking to make this an ugly fight. Maybe you'll see a little bit of this, trying to work some clinch work and work some ugly dirty boxing, so some Muay Thai in the clinch there against the cage. Maybe you see a little bit of that, but do understand that Fugitt is a willing participant to throw down in the center of the cage as well. He'll be throwing some heavy looping left hands and whatnot. So this is a fight that I'm excited for. Yes, I am going to be siding with Kinoshita. Again, he's a savage. He's a pit bull, and I'm gonna say he gets a finish here. I mean, why not? All he does is finish the fight. So Yusaku Kinoshita right out a -335 against Adam Fugitt. Maybe that line is a little high in my opinion. You want to be a little bit careful, just based on the fact that we do want to see a little bit more from Kinoshita. We talked about the victory on Dana White's Contender Series, but you want to see more fights against higher level opponents. Adam Fugitt, not the highest level of opponent, but he's a guy that brings in a good skill set. So this is a fight where Kinoshita can definitely prove something once again. If he can go out there and finish Fugitt, that's another feather he could throw in his cap. But you maybe want to see a little bit more from Yusaku before you're tagging him at a -335 line. It's a tough one to say here with this line. It's a high line. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's more value in Adam Fugitt, in my opinion, at a +255 line. But I think Kinoshita is going to get the job done here. He's a pit bull. We have the return of Doo-ho Choi, the Korean Superboy. It's been a long time since we've seen him throw down in the octagon. He's taking on Kyle Nelson. If you guys remember, the last time we saw the Korean Superboy in the cage was his knockout loss against Charles Jourdain 3 years ago. And I do believe that Choi served in the military for his country. You guys know we've seen that from a variety of fighters that fight out of South Korea, most notably, of course, the Korean Zombie, when we had a significant departure from the UFC and came back and got right back to work. Again, unfortunately, the Korean Zombie not fighting on this card. He was supposed to be fighting with Doo-ho Choi here on this card, but that's not the case. But listen, if you're newer to the sport, or you're a newer fan of MMA or watching the UFC and whatnot, Doo-ho Choi was a fighter that was really hyped up back in the day. We'll run the timeline back real quick. He's 14-4. He's still only 31 years old. I mean, he's in the prime of his career, although he hasn't been active. But if you guys remember, when he was going out there, went out there, got the early knockout victory over Puig there. The finish over Sam Cecilia, who Cecilia used to get a lot of respect back in the day. He was a big time KO artist coming off the Ultimate Fighter. After that, he followed up with another first round victory over Thiago Tavares. Then he had his showcase fight really was the loss against Cub Swanson. And that was a fight where they both threw down, and you were really able to see how technical Choi was. I mean, not that we didn't really see it in those early finishes and those other fights, but he showed to have a lot of heart in that fight. And although at the end of the day, he did drop that fight to Cub Swanson's a legend. And that was a Cub Swanson that was that had more to offer than what we've seen from Cub recently. And we know that Cub still had some flashes over the last couple of years. That was back in 2016. Cub was a killer. All right, so he dropped that fight. Definitely took some damage in that fight. And then what do you know? 2 knockout losses in a row after that to Jeremy Stephens and Jordan, who we know are both guys that can go out there and put their opponents out. So, it's not like Choi... it's not like he went out there and got outclassed by some bums. I mean, they're against reputable competition. I think the layoff may have been good for him. After taking those knockout losses, taking all that damage, he rests up the brain. Just understand that Choi is a very technical fighter. Kyle Nelson, a fighter that has bounced back and forth from the lightweight division and the featherweight division, fighting in the featherweight division here. I do believe his last fight was up at the lightweight division. And I thought that he didn't look good at all, if I'm being quite honest. I thought that Kyle Nelson looked slow in that fight. And we didn't see some of the things that we've seen from Kyle Nelson in the past. He's had some flashes, some limited flashes throughout his career. I do believe that he carries some good power. If he's able to connect, yes, he can hurt you. He could put you out. And that's something that Choi is definitely going to have to be careful about here. We talked about the fact that he's coming off those 2 knockout losses. Nelson is a guy that does possess power, most notably his knockout victory over Polo Reyes. That fight was, I believe it was in the lightweight division. So we'll see how he performs here. Again, we talked about the bouncing around with the weight and whatnot. But I'll tell you this, after the performance that Nelson just put on against Jai Herbert, and I know Herbert's a talented guy, I just really wasn't impressed with Nelson in that fight. Seemed to slow down a little bit, and I'm not going to be picking him here. I'm on Doo Ho Choi. Like I said, the layoff might have not been a bad thing for him. I think that he's a very professional fighter. He'll come right back in ready to go. I don't expect the ring rust to be too much of an issue here. An inch disadvantage for Choi there, an inch height disadvantage, if you want to call it that. These guys have very similar frames. And let's go slide over to Bovada.lv and take a look at this betting line, where we will see that Doo Ho Choi definitely will be the favorite here. Doo Ho Choi a -190 right now, but to come back on Nelson at +155. And now I do want to take a look at the line movement on this fight here. Doo Ho Choi, take a look at DraftKings, opened up as a -215, and as expected from my side, that this line's dipping down the other way a little bit. You take a look at the 3-year layoff, you take a look at the fact that he's been knocked out recently in his last couple of fights, and then you kind of realize that a guy like Kyle Nelson does possess power. I kind of had a feeling that this line would have dipped back the other way. Kyle Nelson was just there in the cage 4 months ago. Before that, he had quite a layoff, but he was just in there 4 months ago, and we know that he's very hungry here. I'm picking Doo Ho Choi to win this fight, but I'm going to actually say that the value is more so on Kyle Nelson, just based on the fact I don't feel comfortable targeting Doo Ho Choi, especially at a -220 line or anywhere in the mid -200s. If that line goes back the other way, I don't feel comfortable or confident in him with the layoff and whatnot, but I do think that he is the more technical fighter. He'll be the more skilled fighter, but just be careful for a hungry Kyle Nelson, who's still only 31 years old. It's not like he's old. He's going to be hungry, and he knows that this is his last chance here. So you got a guy in Kyle Nelson that has his back up against the wall. All right, you corner a dog, and you got to be careful. He's going to be looking to bite, and I think that's the Kyle Nelson we're going to see here in this matchup. But that all being said, Doo Ho Choi, if he plays his cards right and is patient, he will outpoint Kyle Nelson. He'll be the more talented striker, and he'll get the job done. We got a heavyweight matchup here. Marcin Tybura taking on Blagoy Ivanov. Tybura, a fighter that has really cleaned things up over the past couple of years, has really had a late resurgence in his career. Without a doubt, Tybura is a guy that's just been grinding it out and just working on his skill set, getting better and better. There's just no question about it. He's a solid striker. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He pushes the pace in his opponents, and he seems to be in as good of shape as we've ever seen him, really. I mean, you take a look at him, you see he's toned, maybe a little bit more toned than we're used to seeing back in the day. I mean, don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that he's ripped up or anything, but he looks like he's been taking things very seriously. And that's interesting when you talk about a fighter that's 37 years old, but keep in mind, this is the heavyweight division, and we've seen a lot of fighters really start to hit their strides in their mid-30s, mid to late 30s. It is what it is, and I think that that's the Tybura we're talking about here. Ivanov, 36 years old as well. It's not like he's a spring chicken. You know how I like to throw that spring chicken term around. I really like that term, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about spring chickens. So hopefully that doesn't bother you guys there. But Blagoy Ivanov, you know, you all know about the stories of Blagoy getting stabbed in the heart, you know, in the bars over in Bulgaria. A lot of you guys are familiar with Blagoy Ivanov. Of course, he was an actor on the old show Popeye, constantly trying to steal Popeye's girl and stuff and chasing him around and whatnot. Used to go by the name Pluto on the show. And, you know, he's also known for defeating Fedor Emelianenko in a Sambo competition, which, you know, especially back in the day, that was just so highly thought of. But if we're being quite honest, I feel like we haven't really seen him use that skill set in the cage throughout the years. He's a fighter that really likes to try to box it out with his opponents, you know, usually fighting in that southpaw stance, marching forward. He's a little slow. He's tough. But, you know, he's a meat and potato type of fighter. And I mean that with no disrespect. I mean, if he goes in there facing off with an opponent who's not up to par, he will go out there and take him out. But against some of the bigger names, he's dropped the ball. Of course, the Derrick Lewis fight, that was a fight that was a little disappointing at the time, in my opinion. That was a fight, if he could have dug a little bit deeper, if he had a little bit more gas in the tank, he could have took that fight. I feel like we've seen him kind of slow down a little bit later in some of the rounds in his fights. The loss to Augusto Sakai, that's a fight, again, that he could have dug a little bit deeper and pulled that fight off. Then bounced back with the victory over Marcos Rogerio de Lima. That was much needed for him there. You know, the victory over Tai Tuivasa, that's worth noting. Give him credit there. And the victory over against Ben Rothwell almost 4 years ago. He's 5'11" for the heavyweight division compared to the 6'3" of Tybura. In my opinion, Tybura is just the much more naturally larger man here. And again, I understand Ivanov is a stout man, and he has he's grounded. He's not a fighter that's easy to move around. We talked about those sambo skills, but Tybura is a big dude, 6'3" here, 78-inch reach. He's gonna have a 5-inch reach advantage over Blagoy. I think Tybura can use that significantly in this matchup here and use that striking from the outside. Tybura has good kicks. He really does have some underrated kicks. That giant leg right there, that meaty leg will whip up and slap you against the side of your head. I think that he could really have some success from the outside in this fight as Blagoy looks to march forward. I think that we'll see Tybura using his kicks and his boxing, which have been looking just as good as ever. So I guess no real surprise here from the way I'm talking. I'm going to be taking Tybura to win this fight here. I'm going to be taking Marcin Tybura to win this fight via unanimous decision. Ivanov has shown time and time he's a tough fighter to get out of there, so I'm not really edging that finish. Although you never know with the way that Tybura's been looking, maybe he cracks him with the big shot, but Ivanov's tough. I like Tybura to get the job done. Right now on Bovada.lv, Marcin Tybura is a -150. They come back on Ivanov, +125. And let's just take a quick look at how that line has been moving. I'm actually interested here. Tybura on DraftKings opened up as a -195 and has went all the way down to a -145. Major line movement going towards Ivanov's way, so that's interesting. You take note on that. I don't really have any ins on why that line's going that way, because you guys see I'm kind of on the other side. So interesting to me. We'll take note of that. You know, if you guys saw Bilal Muhammad on the Joe Rogan Experience, he had a quick, funny little story about how, you know, he likes to copy how the teller does his fight picks on Instagram the day of the fights, and I guess they train at some of the same gyms. And Ivanov noticed that Bilal didn't pick him in his last fight, and Ivanov, I think he ended up winning that one fight. I think it was his last fight against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, and Ivanov found Bilal Muhammad and kind of gave it to him a little bit, joking around, saying, "Hey, you didn't pick me to win the fight." So Bilal says he has to pick him every time now. So maybe he's pressuring a lot of guys to pick him, you know, in this matchup here, because I think Tybura is the more talented fighter that's really striding right now. And real quick, just worth noting, if you take a look at the level of competition that Tybura has been facing, you know, the loss against Alexander Volkov, you guys know how I feel about Volkov. He's an absolute stud. And, you know, he kind of got outstruck there, but no shame in that loss. Give me Marcin Tybura to win this fight unanimously, and more value on his betting line. I think even all the way up to the back to the -190 range, if it goes back up that high, the value anywhere from that down. In the co-main event, we got Jeong taking on the Brown Bear, Devin Clark. Devin Clark, listen, I'm going to cut to the chase. Devin Clark, a very tough fighter, a fighter that really relies on his wrestling skills, his cardio and his strength. If you're not up to par with your takedown defense, or if you're a little bit lacking with your cardio, I do believe that Clark is a good fighter to take advantage of that. We've seen him do that to an Alonzo Menafield back in the day, and I say that back in the day because obviously Menafield getting better by the day, and he kind of just caught Menafield slipping back then. That was about 2.5 years ago. Menafield has refined his craft, but in that fight, he was able to hang on Menafield, push him up against the cage, and kind of drag him into deep waters. Did get a finish against William Knight, but we know William Knight, an up and down type of fighter. Other than that, losses to Azamat, Mirzakhanov just got finished in that fight. The loss against Ayan Kutilaba, which Kutilaba just unfortunately really just has really fell off. So, that loss even looks worse. And in that fight, Kutilaba getting the better of the wrestling exchanges and all that. And then getting finished by Anthony Smith before that, getting outclassed. No disrespect to Devin Clark, because actually I kind of like his personality and I like what he stands for and what he's about. I don't really see I don't see the skill set as far as when it comes to the striking. You got a guy in Jeong who has a crazy frame. He's going to have a 3.5 inch reach advantage here. He's 4 inches taller. He has a good jab. He has good boxing. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's very confident in there. When he's in the cage, he's a very confident fighter. Now, he is coming off a big-time loss. Definitely, that's something to note here, coming off that knockout loss, but it was against Dustin Jacoby. One of the top fighters in the division right now. In my opinion, that was a fight where you're talking about just two high-level opponents going in there, throwing down, and Jeong just happened to get caught there. I think if those guys fought 100 times, I think that it would be pretty even, in my opinion. I like the skill set that Jeong possesses. 15-3-1 as a pro. Knockout victory. Those were those standing elbows that he had against Kennedy and Sheku before that. That was a big time victory for him there. We know Kennedy's a stud. Before that, defeating William Knight. So that a common opponent there. He had the split draw with Sam Alvey. I believe a point was deducted, if I remember correctly. The knockout victory over Mike Rodriguez. So, Jeong's been doing his thing. Like I said, he's a talented striker. He's a talented fighter. And I think that he'll get the better of Clark, in that range. And when they're at distance in the middle of the cage, I think that Jeong will be the guy that kind of styles on the Brown Bear here. The Brown Bear will probably look to make this an ugly fight. He'll be hanging on Jeong, hanging on those legs, trying to smother him. But overall, I think that Jeong is going to land, and I think that he'll have good enough takedown defense to kind of keep this fight where he wants to, and he'll land those big shots. I am picking Jeong to get the job done here. I sense a potential finish in this fight. I sense a potential first or second round finish by Jeong here. That's kind of the route I'm going. Let's go take a look at the betting line over on Bovada.lv, and we will see that Jeong is a minus 235 favorite, and I have no issue with how hefty that line is. In my opinion, I think that's it's accurate enough. It's somewhat accurate. I could even see that line hitting 250, 260. So I'll say there's more value on Jeong at minus 235. I think he'll be hungry after that loss he just took. He's a very talented fighter. Clark's a tough customer. It's just that he's lacking a little bit, in my opinion, when it comes to the finesse skills, and I think Jeong will take advantage of that. Hey guys, you know the routine. If you're looking to sign up to a new sports book, if you haven't already signed up to Bovada.lv, make sure you reach out to me so I can send you over my referral link, and you're going to get an added bonus to your newly made account. And most importantly, I'm going to be hooking you up with some free official plays. So I think it's worth your while if you guys are interested. I think it's the best sports book out there. Hit me up if you're interested. You can shoot me an email that's scrolling below, or shoot me a DM on Twitter or Instagram. The Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, taking on Sergey Spivak, the Polar Bear. Listen, we mentioned it in the intro to the video. Derrick Lewis coming off a loss to a Sergey. That was Sergey Pavlovich. I do believe Pavlovich is a little bit of a different customer than Spivak. Both men have a lot of similarities, but also different at the same time. Pavlovich is just a whole different animal when it comes to the boxing. his very sharp boxing, very serious power. We just saw that once again. I saw that live cage side where he just went out there and knocked out Tai Tuivasa and shut down the whole arena. That was spectacular. Spivac is a fighter that really likes to use his wrestling a little bit more so, wrestling and ground and pound, which I do believe will, if you compare the opponents, I think that Lewis fares a little bit better against a guy like Spivac. But the thing that you got to understand is that Lewis, he's 37 years old. He's about to be 38 in a couple days. Lewis is a fighter that, he's a little hit or miss, if we're being honest. He has some of the most spectacular knockouts that we've ever seen. Of course, the finish against Curtis Blades. There's so many great comebacks. The comeback knockout victory over Alexander Volkov. I was in Vegas for that. What a heartbreaker that was. Volkov breaking the statistical record at the time for the division and then getting knocked out with seconds left. Oh, did that hurt so bad. But Lewis obviously has grown on me. He's one of the number one fan favorite fights in the game right now. He's one of my favorite fighters, but he's getting up there in age. He's a fighter that if you're able to put it on him, he's a fighter that he has broke in the past. We've seen that. Even dating back to some of his older fights, where if you could remember, getting knocked out against Matt Mitrione, getting finished against a fighter. What's his name? Is Jordan something. I actually met him back in the day in Tampa. Let me run that real quick. If you guys remember, that was a fun fight where he got finished against Sean Jordan. That was a crazy fight. Got hit with the head kick. Finished against Matt Mitrione. They got it listed as ram and punches, if you remember that, because he kind of did just bum rush him and then tag him with the shot. Finished against Mark Hunt, the walk-off knockout. So my point is that we've seen, and you look at even as of recently, finished against Tai Tuivasa, got hit with that elbow, finished against Pavlovich, picked apart against Gon, and just kind of crumbled in that fight. I do kind of question, and I don't mean this to be insulting, I question Lewis's mindset right now. I know he's been making good money throughout the last couple of years, and I just question his durability and where he's at. He eats a couple shots, and I think that he's a fighter that's prone to just kind of crumbling up here. Now, Spivak will have to have success with his wrestling, in my opinion. I think that, he could definitely have success on the feet as well, but he needs to get a couple takedowns here, push the pace on Lewis, get Lewis breathing heavy, and then look to start to wear on him and put it on him there. And I could see Spivak getting a finish here, anywhere from the second to third round here, maybe later, but I think more so earlier. I think Spivak gets a finish in this fight. I just don't see Lewis holding up for 5 rounds. Obviously, Lewis is going to come out early. He's going to be throwing heavy, and Lewis will be very live to get his own knockout. You can never question that. The power Lewis possesses, the all-time knockout leader in the heavyweight division of the UFC. That's a serious accolade. Lewis, a 79-inch reach, will have a 1-inch reach advantage. They're both 6'3". Lewis a little bit heavier here, but I think that actually will favor Spivak, as he'll be a little bit more in shape. He'll push the pace here, mixing things up, and I think that Spivak will eventually break Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis will then have lost 4 of his last 5 fights, so that'll be a tough skid for Lewis. It'll be unfortunate. If he's able to get that knockout victory, maybe we get to see a little bit more from him. But I don't know about that. All right, we take a look at that betting line right now. On Bovada.lv, Sergey Spivak is a -265. It's a pretty big time favorite there. Derrick Lewis is a +190. I get it. It's just really hard to back Lewis at this point in time. It's really based on some of the things we talked about. Where is his mental and just the age and all that, and then you got this young and hungry fighter in Sergey Spivak that really shows to have some flashes of promise. I'm going with Sergey Spivak, like I said, to get the finish here in the second or third rounds via TKO, maybe down in the mat, just kind of breaking Lewis. All right, guys, that's gonna wrap up today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. We got a lot of big fight cards coming up in the near future. As you guys can see, this is the first time I'm recording a recap with this type of format, but again, I want to make sure you guys understand that this is just a temporary format. This is going to get better and better and better. I'm just learning this green screen stuff, and I'm working on a new program to really make these videos look dope for you guys. So just to give you guys a heads up, what's going on over here. I'm very excited about what's going on. I've kind of had a new resurgence with the channel and whatnot, because I see what I'm aiming for and what this product's going to look. And it's going to take some time, not long, but it's going to take some time, because this new program that I'm working with, and you know, it's a lot of little stuff that I'm working on and trying to learn. Some of it's new to me, but I already know what the overall product's gonna look like once it's all said and done. And once I master this, the videos are gonna be stellar for you guys. So that's kind of where I'm at. We talked about the New Year's goals. We're definitely not forgetting about them. I hope you guys are all on point with your goals. Make sure you guys remember what you set out to hit up for the year 2023, and make sure you're doing what you need to be doing to move forward with them. As I promised you guys are going to see that growth from the channel here, right? I kept my word, so hopefully you guys are keeping your word too, whether that was hitting up some jogging a couple times a week, hitting the weights up, eating healthy, motivating yourself and pushing towards your goals, whatever you got going on from the work side of things, making money. Remember, guys, we had that plan as we kicked off this new year, so make sure you're not forgetting about that. That's what I want to be talking about right now. I kept my word here, and this is nothing. I promise a lot more to come. You guys better be keeping your word and moving forward with what you guys got going on, all right? Life's great. Life's beautiful. Remember that. And we got a lot more great parting words coming your guys' way in the near future. This one's a little bit more simple, but I think it's an important one too. All right, guys. So let me know which way you guys are leaning for this fight card and what you guys see out there. And if you're leaning towards any certain lines, certain fighters that you feel very confident about, hit that comment section up below. All right, guys. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.